Eric was on a mission now. He filled up his backpack as big as it could get with apples, and very specific apples. I don't know which ones they were, but heirloom apples they look very different than each other, colors, shapes, and things like that. So he got one particular batch, and he took it to Dick, and they made some apple wine. And Dick said, "Come back in 4 months, and we'll try it." We just wanted to let it settle out. 4 months later, Eric went back to see Dick, and they had some of this apple wine. And Eric said when he tasted and smelled the glass, he could actually tell where those apples came from. He could kind of sense the soil, the trees that were around the apple orchard, like the pine trees. He could sense the just kind of the whole place, and that's what it's really called, a sense of place. When you're tasting a wine, kind of like whiskeys too. You can kind of get a sense of place from where the whiskey is from when you do that with whiskeys. That got him very much interested in apple wine. So he started doing that. He was making beer out of college. That's what you do. So he's making beer, and then he's making apple wine. It got him interested in grape wine. So went off to California and went to UC Davis and graduated that program. UC Davis is one of 3 major viticulture and enology, which means grape growing, winemaking programs in the country. On the East Coast is Cornell University. On the West Coast is UC Davis. Started working at David Bruce. I don't know if you've ever seen David Bruce Chardonnay, David Bruce Pinot Noir. He became the Chardonnay master at David Bruce. While he was there, he met a guy named John. His last name I can never remember, but we always call him Big John because he really is big. And he had a vineyard back here in Arizona. And he asked Eric if he would make wine for John out here. And Eric said, "Yeah, but I want to go back to Arizona also because I really love the place. So I don't know how long I will be with you, but I will be with you for a time and make wine." Well, it happened to be just over the hill over here, called Echo Canyon Winery, which is no longer in existence. But Eric was working right down the street. Now, during his times as a creek walker, he went along Oak Creek, which is running behind our property, which we'll see a little bit later. Looked up at this property and said, "Someday I'm going to buy this. I really like it." There was a couple cows on it. There was some farming stuff on it. And he decided one day he's going to buy this property. So then he went off to California, forgot all about it, came back to work for John, and he came driving by this road, and there was a for sale sign up front. So Eric pulled in and walked on the property and immediately recognized it from this end as the property that he wanted when he looked at it from the other end. So he was looking at both ends of the property. So he immediately called his family in 2003 and said, "I need money. Send money. I'm buying this piece of property. I'm going to make a vineyard and create my life right here." So he lives in the area. He's here almost every day. His wife runs the yoga program, the massage program, and the hula hoop dancing program. His kids have worked here. His parents and step-parents have worked here. Everybody's kind of worked. All families kind of worked here. If you worked here and you had someone in the family, your family would probably work here too. My wife has been here every once in a while, more of a volunteer than a worker. But it's really a family-oriented business and really focused on Arizona, what Arizona has to offer, and Arizona grape growing production. That's kind of the start of where we were. I don't know if you noticed the covering for the cars over here. Those are 375 solar panels. We have solar panels on top here, solar panels on our other cellar over there. We are completely solar now. We don't have batteries, we don't store it, but what we do is we produce enough power to sell back to the electric companies, and we use it in a lot of it in harvest time. We've already created it so we're not buying more, so we're totally 100% solar. We have our own water processing plant, so all the water that's used upstairs, downstairs, whatever, gets through that water processing plant, reused around the property. everything we can recycle, we do. We compost and reuse everything from the winemaking facilities downstairs. So we're trying to make as small a footprint as possible on the plant. We're going to have a little wine because that's what we're going to drink. Just kind of keep your 6 foot distance from everybody, and then you can have your mask off when you want to sip wine. If you want to wear it, that's fine too, whatever you want to do. I have to wear mine. This is the last time you'll see me. Is there any questions about any of that so far?
How big a property is this?
We have 4 acres here. We actually have 29 acres, but we'll talk about that in just a little bit when we go down below. We're going to start off with some wine. This is called Ramonette. Hold on to this glass. We're going to use this for the entire tour. Now just sip a little bit, let your whistle, don't drink the whole thing right away. Thank you. Who's that around your neck?
That's my grandma.
Oh, cool. Thank you. There we go.
Thank you.
By the way, a few minor details that I forgot already. You'll pay at the end. I know nobody's paid already. There's always a question about that. You'll pay me at the end. And I don't take American Express, so anything else but that. Ramonette is growing at the bottom of our hill, on our field here. It is a cross between Gewürztraminer, which you may have heard of, and Johann Sev, which is a grape indigenous to the Northeast. The reason they crossed that is because they wanted to grow Gewürztraminer in the Northeast, and the winters were too cold for the grapevines to survive. Johann Sev is from there, so it can survive the winters. So what they did was they just cross-pollinated the two and created a new grape called Ramonette. That's basically what's called a French-American hybrid, even though Gewürztraminer is German. It's a French-American hybrid. When you cross, it's the same thing. It's a grape, but it's 2 different species. One is winemaking and one is food producing. 2 different species of grape. So they put them together, so French American hybrid. So that's across there. Go ahead and when you sip this, hold it in your mouth and let it warm up for a little bit. Because if you just sip it and take it down, you get a lot of acid, but not much else. You let it warm up, you'll get some wonderful apple and pear and quince notes in the wine. I always like my whites a little warmer than everybody else because I really like to get into what the wine has to offer. If you're just drinking cold wine, you're really just drinking lemonade. Basically, you just get acid and water. You really want to get some of the better profiles to what a grape has to offer. So let's get up and go for a walk. We're going to go down in the vineyard.
Good true. So this is the original building here. The people who lived here lived upstairs. The animals lived downstairs. The building over there, a casita, that's where the chickens live. And then it was where the farm hands lived after that. And now is our offices. Right next to that is our massage sala.
They're doing great couples massages there if that's an interest for you. Hour-long massage, bottle of wine, a little bit of food. Makes a great way to fill a day up there. So this was the original building, the actual original style. This building behind actually is not here. We knocked down the original building and built a cellar and a tasting room to make it look like this one. The bridge right here we're going to cross, and on what we're crossing over is Page Springs. James Page homesteaded at the mouth of the spring about a quarter-mile up the road. If you leave here and turn left and go a quarter-mile up the road, there'll be some trees growing over the road, and then a rock wall. And in that rock wall, there's a little metal grate, and that is where Page Spring comes up out of the ground. It goes under the road and to the fish hatchery, which is right across the street. And then the fish hatchery uses it first, and then it comes right down this channel, and we use it second, and then everybody else who's along this channel before it dumps into Oak Creek gets to use it. It comes out of the ground at 2,000 gallons a minute, and it's 68 degrees year-round. So in the wintertime it's warmer, in the summertime it's cooler. Just kind of a cool thing to have come through the property. There are dozens springs right up on the ground, right here in this general area. They put out 15 million gallons. Oh, you know, they don't even know where this water comes from. This water is so old that they've tried to do some isotope testing on it, and they can't figure out where it comes from or how old it is. And it just comes right up out of the ground. There's obviously a lot of water under here somewhere. It just pops up right here. Oak Creek, which is where those white trees are, that surround our property, starts at the base of the Flagstaff area, runs through Oak Creek Canyon and through Sedona, runs around through the desert and around us, and then down to the Verde River, which then also runs down to the ocean. There's water everywhere around here. Who's from, are you all from Arizona? Everybody? Everybody not from Arizona? Okay, so to our east is the Mogollon Rim. Anybody heard of Mogollon Rim? Where Payson is? Payson, so Flagstaff on this end, wrapped around to Payson, Pine, Strawberry, then down Bumblebee Highway down to Phoenix. You from around here? Phoenix? Okay. So the Mogollon Rim it's still full of snow. It's been snow up there since September. That's where all this water sort of comes from. Now on the other side of the river is just Mingus Mountain, and that's kind of it. So if you live on the other side of the river, which I do, my well has to go 600 feet deep before I get water, because it just hits the mountain, comes right. There's not a whole lot of water. But if you're on this side of the river, all of that snowpack and rain and everything that happens on the Mogollon Rim all goes into the ground and heads toward the Verde River. So there's a lot more water on this side than there is on that side. That's kind of where the water comes from, sort of. It's been running like this forever. James Page, who started the fish hatchery up the road in the 1920s, built his house around where the spring came out. He started the fish hatchery. The state bought the fish hatchery in 1938. So it's been a fish hatchery for almost 100 years. The cool thing about having the fish hatchery there is we also get the big birds. Because big birds like the little fish. So we get the great blue herons, a couple kinds of eagles, a couple kinds of hawks. They're all just flying up and down the creek because we have the fish hatchery. Between the fish hatchery and us is a bird sanctuary, and all the birds think it's springtime, so they're all over there. So if you want to walk the paths through there, that's also a really cool thing to do too. So we'll cross over Page Spring and we'll go over toward the vineyards to the left-hand side.
Careful. Careful. Come on, this way. Come.
About how we use Page Springs water. We use Page Springs water to irrigate the landscape. We don't use it to irrigate the plants for the vineyard. If we did that, there would be hardly anything to go down to anybody else that's down there. We have on occasion in the winter time when it's gotten really cold, there are some taps that come out of that trench and pop out over here and will flood this area whole vineyard, because when it's really cold, back like below freezing, like in the 20s, the water that comes out here, like I said, is 68 degrees. So we'll run that water 68 degrees all through here, and because it's warmer, that heat will rise up and will keep the vines from freezing. So it's kind of like flood irrigating, but we're using it for temperature control rather than watering the plants. This is the home vineyard. This is the original vineyard, plus what's out around the parking lot. We planted Syrah, Petit Syrah, Mourvedre, and Grenache on this property. That's the four main red grapes of the Rhone Valley in southeast France. Rhone River runs north and south down southeast France, and goes through Provence, where all the amazing rosés are, and then down into the Mediterranean. So that heat from the Mediterranean, the moisture from the Mediterranean is very similar to our heat and our summer rains. Speaking of rosé from Provence, we need more wine. Yeah. So because we are so similar here to southeast France, that's why we planted Syrah, Petit Syrah, Mourvedre, and Grenache here. Down below here was the Mourvedre, and it was next to the creek, and it didn't like it because it was cold. So we moved the Mourvedre up top, and we put Ramonette, which we just finished, right down below there. So that's where your Ramonette came from, the bottom of this field. This rosé is coming from House Mountain Vineyard. We have 8 acres up there. Then we have 8 acres up on the Dos Padres vineyard. Dos Padres, whose two fathers, Eric's father and stepfather, purchased that property up here. So we have 20 acres up here.
It's such a great jacket. Whoops.
People always ask me, how does this thing work? I have no idea. I know that there's ball bearings inside, and there's bubbles that go through it, and the ball bearings stop the wine from coming through. And it pours a perfect balance every time. Sometimes it pours more. This grape that this wine is made from is called Couloise. So Couloise is one of the minor grapes from the Rhone Valley. There's 22 grapes in the Rhone Valley. The big four, which I mentioned already, and then Couloise is another one. That's what this is made from. Does anybody know how rosé is made? There's 2 ways to make rosé. The first one is to take a lot of white wine and a little bit of red and put it together, and you get rosé. The real way to do it is to take a red grape like Couloise, bring it in at harvest, and let it cold soak inside the cellar for about 3 or 4 days to extract the color from the skins so you get the color you want. So when you bite into a grape, doesn't matter if it's red or green or whatever, it's just clear on the inside. It's just pulp and water. That's all it is. Some sugar. So the way that you make a wine, red, white, or pink, is you extract the color from the skins. All of your flavor profiles, everything comes from the skin of the grape. So this is a red grape. It is soaked for 4 days to get color out of it. It is a salmon color, which is very similar to what Provence rosés will get you. When you go to a wine store and you purchase or get into the rosé section to try and decide which one you want, you notice they're all different colors. All that is the winemaker deciding what color they want. Right? So salmon color is kind of classic Provence style, so that's what they'll go for. The darker ones, sometimes made us, that's more like Italian style. Even darker, you can get something that looks almost red, but it's not really a red wine. It's still a rosé, because rosé is the process that it's going through. You take a red grape and you let it soak for a really long time. Before fermentation, that's the key. You keep it cold, so all you get is color and no fermentation. When you get the color you want, you press it off the skins, and then you add the yeast to make the fermentation start, and you make it like a white wine. That's the process. So when you get a red wine, sometimes people say, oh, it looks like rosé because it's really pale red. Well, it looks like a rosé, but it's not a rosé because it's not good to make. A very light colored red was made by just starting the fermentation process. The color gets extracted at the same time the fermentation is happening, and when it is finished, all the juice is taken off, everything is pressed off the skins, and the wine is flowing. Again, the rosé, you do all that before you start the process. It's pruning season. So the way the vineyard works, everything is focused toward harvest. So the way the vineyard works is that right now, it looks like last year's wood, and we recently can tell that it's got this kind of yellow wood. Years before that, it was dark. Darker wood. So the vineyard crew is out, madly cleaning away, because bud break happens in about 3 weeks. Come back, and you'll start to see pussy willows looking things on the plants. And then everything kind of turns yellow-green when the first leaves come out. And so you have kind of a purple yellow-green. It's really my favorite time of year. It's really, really pretty. And then the shoots get about this big before they change color, so it really gets kind of like edge there. Right behind this first row, you'll see plants that look like they don't exist. It's because after 17 years, we decided the Syrah, the Petite Syrah, didn't like it there. It was actually too wet. We have the water here, we have the water over there, the summer rains. Syrah and Petite Syrah clusters are really tight together, and they would rot. So after 17 years of getting half a crop, we took them out and we planted Aglianico, which is an Italian grape with looser cluster and thicker skin. So the air would easier flow through the cluster, keep it from rotting, get it to dry out a little bit more. Hopefully we'll get full crops instead of half a crop each time. That's why behind here, those are only 1 year old. It's going to take 4 years before you get fruit off of those. First year you establish the roots, then you cut the whatever growth off so it starts again like this. When you get a grape vine from a nursery, it looks like a bare root rose. You know, there's roots hanging out and there's a little thing sticking on the top. So you plant that in the ground, it's a little stick sticking out, and then you get the shoots coming out, the roots going down. First year you let the roots grow, and then you cut it back off to where it was before. So the second year you grow the trunk, the third year you grow the arms, and then the fourth year you grow those stars that come up, and that's when you start taking fruit on your fourth year. Fourth year, fifth year is your big year, and every year after that is the same as the fifth year, because that's when you get your maximum fruit starting in year 5. Half the fruit comes in year 5. So bud break in a couple of weeks, flowering in mid-April. Grapes come out in mid-May. They're tiny, they're like little peas. They're super tart. You kind of bite them and you have to spit them out because it's just nasty. So what happens is sugar levels and acid levels switch during the maturation process. During that time, the color also changes. Everything is kind of yellow-green. The white ones stay that way, the red ones change color into red. All that while the sugar's rising and the acid is dropping. Sugar that you get in a wine grape is like 3 times what you get in a table grape that you buy from the store. It's sickening sweet. It's so sweet. Yeah, that face. That's what face you get when you eat one. Because you can eat like 5 or 6 and you go, oh man, it's like just eating honey out of a jar. Table grapes in the store are like 1/3 the sweetness. The reason for that is you need the alcohol to a certain level, like say 13% alcohol. So the grape bricks is what the degrees measurement is. It needs to be at like 26. It's twice as much as the alcohol level. So you can go out there and you measure your grapes, and when you get to 26, you know you have 13% alcohol. That's what the winemaker wants. You better pick the next day, otherwise it's going to keep going up and up and up. So the vineyard crews out there, they'll start testing, and they're like 20 bricks. And we're like, okay, we've got probably a week. Because it can happen like half a brick a day or a full brick a day. So they're out there morning and afternoon testing and see when the sugar. Hopefully it doesn't rain because that waters the grapes out and drops the sugar level. We got to go back again and do it all over. That's how the sugar gets to a certain place. Harvest starts around mid-August for the early whites, and the last one, the Counoise, which this rosé came from, comes off in the beginning of October. Insanity is right in the middle of September. That's when everything is coming off at the same time and the winemakers don't sleep. Let's head down to the creek so you can just take a look at that a little bit. And I'll get you some more wine down there. Any questions about growth?
So if you were to come out in September, can you fry the grapes when they're doing the harvest?
Yeah, you can do that if you want. I would recommend it just because not only you can taste them, but you have no idea what they sprayed on the day before. Now, we always spray things that are natural and good, but that doesn't mean it's healthy for you. Like we'll spray bacteria on the grapes that will kill mold. But it's a naturally growing, occurring bacteria, and its whole thing is to go out and kill mold. But you don't want to, you don't know that we did that this morning and you come by this afternoon and you pop that in your mouth. You don't know. So if you're going to do that, take them and go wash them off before you eat them. You never know what we did. Is the massage cellar. You'll notice that we diverted the water from Page Springs to go under here, underneath the massage room, so that while you're getting a massage, you can hear the water going right under the table. Favorite grape, Sangiovese. This is what Chianti is made from. You'll notice that the tannins, where we pull the dryness, the thing that makes your mouth dry like a tea bag, you'll notice that these tannins are really smooth and silky. You'll get some wonderful sour cherry fruit. You might get a little nose of tobacco, leather, ash. If you leave this in your mouth, you'll start to feel those tannins start to draw on the sides of your cheeks. This is Sangiovese. Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting note. The gentleman just asked if this was a cab. And it brought to mind something somebody asked me a while back on a tour. they were confused. They thought Cabernet meant red. When, well, Cabernet is red, but it doesn't mean red. So just because there's a bunch of red wines out there doesn't mean they're all Cabernet. Cabernet is the grape. Pinot Noir is the grape. Chardonnay is the grape. Sangiovese, what you're drinking, is the grape. They all make red wine. Cabernet happens to be the grape that most people know because it's big and luscious and fruity, and that's what a lot of people like. I like the lighter style like these. This is where I go. This is my go-to wines right in here. Medium body, a little bit of tartness, some nice acidity to it, some wonderful secondary notes on the nose. I'm more for tobacco and leather than I am for cherries and strawberries. That's the Chardonnay is another one. Chardonnay is a white grape that makes Chardonnay. Pinot Grigio, Sauvignon Blanc, they're all different grapes. You get just from the skin. It's just what the skin produces. It produces that smell. Yeah. It's funny about wines. You always describe a wine by something other than grape. You know, it's strawberries, cherries, blackberries, blueberries, lemons, limes, peaches, apricots, leather, tobacco, tar, wet tobacco, wet leather, dried up leather, rose petals, everything but grape. That's just the way wine is. Over here, this is what the crew is doing right now. They're taking and they're pruning all this hairy stuff back because every one of these leaves have a bud underneath it. And if we just left it there, they would just start coming out. And then the thing would be all bushy and you'd have grapes everywhere. So we bring it all down to 2 buds, which will give us a shoot coming out of each bud. And each shoot will give us 2 clusters of grapes, so that each spur gives us 4 clusters of grapes. It takes 2.5 clusters or 2.5 pounds of grapes to make 1 bottle. So we want to have as many as we possibly can. This vine happened to be generous to us by putting all of its spurs in the right spot. Sometimes they're all over the place. They grow down from, you can see some over here, they're going down, they're going sideways. You really want like this where the buds on either side, left and right. Because when the shoot comes up, it's easy to stick it between the catch wires. Because if they're growing front to back, the shoot's going to go this way. In order to get it on the catch wire, you have to bend it back around, and it's sticking out, and it's going to break off anyway eventually because it's out in the middle. But this is what we're doing right now. We also have 9 acres in southern Arizona in the Chiricahua Mountains. That soil looks like this, which is crushed granite, and it gives a little bit of a white pepper note to everything that goes out of it, so that the spiciness of the fruit that comes out of it, you can taste in the wine. There's a little bit of a spice note. So we have 29 acres, so we're working like crazy because we got like 3 weeks left before these all start to push. And they all look like little pussy willows on either side before the little leaves pop out.
How old is that?
This is 17 years old.
17?
This is the bottom part.
Yeah, compare
This
that.
is last year.
No, compare to that one. That big, thick one.
Those are all 17 years old, but they're different grapes.
Oh,
Those
okay.
big ones that are grown over the top, those are table grapes. That's what happens when you let a grape do its thing. It just goes everywhere. This is what happens when you train it so all of the fruit is right in the middle. Because come harvest time, you want all the fruit right in there so that it's really easy to pick. Those are different types of table grapes you can come through here in the summertime. This arbor is all green. It's so beautiful. And you just pick some grapes and eat them. They are seeded. No, these are not like seedless grapes. They're all seeds. But this is what the vineyard crew is up to right now. Take a look at the creek for just a sec. As you see on the corner. You see these guys? This one's growing up. This one's growing down. That's growing up. This is growing down. So we're going to take all the ones that are growing down, take them off. This guy has 2 growing out of it, so we'll just skip off one of them. We don't want 2 of them. We call these bunny ears, or rabbit ears, because that's what they are. And there's a space here. Nothing grew right here. So we want to have that space. We have a little space right here, but we'll take off this one which actually leaves an extra space here to take off this bottom one. So this one's not spaced as well as that one is over there. And that's just because the plant and how much water the plant receives. Plant receives a lot of water. You get big spaces in between the buds. Plant gets a little, you can actually see this right here. This plant was getting a lot of water right there, and it's about 2 inches worth of spacing. And it got a very little bit of water, so it's only about an inch of spacing right there. This is our fish depth, by the way. Feel free to come down here after the tour, get yourself a bottle of wine, a cheese pot, or something like that. I'll walk down here next to the water. It's really kind of nice. Yeah.
You guys have weddings here?
We do small ones.
Okay.
50 is our maximum. One for parking and two for you have a talk and I walk into doing the wedding. So, the first wine we had was from down below. The second, the pink, was from up on House Mountain. House Mountain is a old volcano. It's called House Mountain because there's a little bump on top of it by the house. So that's House Mountain. So that volcano put out a lot of rock there and over on all the other hills. All these stone walkways and walls and things like that, they all came out of the field in order for us to plant.
We were also underwater for twice. So this whole place filled up. We were in ocean. The water receded and washed the soils off the sides of the hills down to the lower part here. Filled up again, and 1 million years later, washed the soils down. So right down here is beautiful brown soil. Up on the sides is just rock and limestone. You know, if you're from Phoenix and around here with the hard water, you get that ring of lime, calcium on the peacocks and things like that. If you look on top of this ridge, that big gray layer on the top, that's limestone. That's the same thing. That's the calcium deposits that were in that water that were just kind of settled like on the beach and washed itself down. So those soils up on the hillside are all limestone and lava rock. Very different kind of soil than this here, the more rich soil than the big one. And then the granite soil down in our other vineyard, because the Chiricahua Mountain soil is granite. And so when they deteriorate, that creates that granite soil. And then not a third amazing soil to grow grapes on. So during harvest, and then the Sangiovese you just said, we bought some fruit from a vineyard called Deep Sky, and they're in the center of the Wilcox area, so west of those Chiricahua Mountains, and that was all cattle country. That's sandy and loamy, so another different type of soil there. We can stay within our own 29 acres, but we don't grow Sangiovese, so why would we deprive ourselves of not getting some? So we'll buy something from someone else. We'll sell some of our Syrah. It's a very big family in this business anyway. Everybody trades fruit back and forth. We're only allowed to produce 20,000 gallons of juice a year. If we produce more than that, we become a major producer, and then our taxes are higher and our productions are, different rules and regulations. So we keep it at the 20,000 small farm winery license, so we can do basically whatever we want. When harvest time comes around, again, end of August, all of September, a little bit of October, these little bins go underneath the vine rows. We start first thing in the morning, first light, as long as it's light enough that you don't cut the person's fingers across from you. And 2 people on either side will walk right down the row. And since the grapes are right here, it's really easy to snip and drop and you work your way right down the row. It does take 3 days to do that block up there because it's so big. Because we only do it from sun up to about 11, then it gets too hot. So 11 o'clock we stop and go back and do some of the next block. So these bins are underneath the vines. Someone comes behind you with a little trailer and picks them all up and then takes them over to the truck if it's down south, or the landing area if it's right here, and dumps them into these gray or white bins. This will hold 3/4 of a ton of fruit. This will hold a 1/2 ton of fruit. Every grape that comes in here comes right down this road, right here. There's a forklift, stops right there. This big machine is turned and it sits right here. That's our distemmer. So the forklift picks up the big bin and dumps the fruit into the hopper on the top. Has a screw in it. Takes all of the fruit down to one end, or it starts dropping down into the middle machine, which is the actual distemmer. We've got paddles on the inside that rotate one way. Stainless steel cylinder that rotates the other way with holes in it. You can see the holes in there. And the fruit comes through there. The paddles knock berries off of the stems, and they fall through the holes into a bin right underneath. The stems, being too big to go through the holes, get spit out the other side in the big trash can. You can do a ton of fruit in about 15 to 20 minutes. And this is a really busy place come harvest time, because the truck will come in. I a lot of times will drive the truck. It's my favorite job. Just drive down, get the fruit, come back. And I'll come back with like 6 tons of fruit. So that's 6 times 20 minutes besides driving back and forth. It's a couple hours. Easy, just to get the fruit off the truck and get the fruit off the stems. Once that fruit is in the stems, is in the bins, it's called must. So that's the juice, the skins, the seeds, everything but the stems from a grape. That's when we add the yeast to it. The yeast eats the sugar
and creates alcohol. That's what we want. If you let the yeast eat all of the sugar, it becomes a dry wine. If you stop the process, and when it gets to the sweetness you want, chill it down so the yeast die. You don't like the cold. Then you have a sweet wine because you have some what's called residual sugar left over. There's two ways to make a sweet wine. That's one way. The other way is you just let them make a dry wine and you throw sugar back into it. That's kind of cheap, but it's done a lot to make a sweet wine. So it takes about 7 to 10 days for red wine to ferment completely dry, no more sugar. The yeast produces a lot of heat. It gets to about 85 degrees. 75 degrees. 85 is dead. 75 degrees on the yeast. They also produce some CO2, which that gas raises the skins. We call it the cap, floats on top. So you have to come by 4 times a day and punch that skin back down into the juice, kind of like making a stew and stirring things up. You punch it back in. So anybody wants to volunteer for the 2 o'clock a.m. shift to do that, come on by. This is why winemakers don't sleep during harvest, because you got to be there at 2 o'clock in the morning to do that punch down, because it's every 6 hours or something like that to getting that down in there. So after 7 to 10 days, the red wine is done. Put a hose in that big bin. We'll pump the juice out. That's called free run juice. Everything we need is pumped out. It's free run, clean, and fresh juice. What's left over is called the pomace. Pomace is the skins, the seeds, and the dead yeast, and everything else. There's still juice in there. So what we have to do there is we have to put it into a press and get the rest of the juice out. The press is over here. That's why this is such a busy place. So this is our press. Costs more than my house. When you finish pumping out the free run juice, you have all that yuck left over. Forklift brings it back out from the cellar, up and dumps it into the top. It all falls into this big cylinder, which is actually hollow. It's like a big submarine inside. And then there is a balloon. You close the door, and there's a balloon up against one sidewall. And you turn the machine on, and the balloon blows up and presses the skins against the sides. And you can do 1 bars, 2 bars, 3 bars. A bar is 13 to 14 and a half pounds. So your car tires are like 3 bars. And that's how it's designed here. You go by bars. And it presses those skins. It breaks the rest of the cells in the skin and the walls of the skin to get as much flavor and tannin and everything out. And it presses it until it's like super dry. And the skins become like tissue paper. That dry, it's just that strong. And that's what's called press wine. So the press wine and the free run juice are kept separately for aging for the 9 to 10 months we age our wines before we bottle. During that time, in the springtime, the winemakers will all get together and start tasting through everything and decide how much of this press wine do I want to put back into this free run. It's like making orange juice. And the first part of it is nice, clean, fresh juice, and then you get down to the pith and the white and orange parts, and that's kind of the pressed stuff. How much of that pith you want to put back in there to give that juice a little character? That's where the character is in the press, really. Now we have made 2 different wines from the same batch. One was pressed and one was free run, and we bottled them separately. We had votes on which one we liked better. Everybody's different. I always like the clean, fresh one more than I like the one with more character, especially the white. In a white wine, speaking of that, we skip its destemmer. We bring it right to the press. Right? So in a red wine, goes destemmer, fermentation, pump it out, press. In a white wine, comes out of the field, right into the press. Gets pressed off. We do it about 2 bars of pressure.
breaking the skins just a little bit to get some of the aromatics out, some of the flavor profiles. Not too much, because we don't want to get too much flavor profile in. And then we'll take that juice and we will put it in a refrigerated vat. It's at 40 degrees. Add the yeast, and it takes 30 days for a white wine to ferment to dry. So 10 days for a red because it's hot, 30 for a white because it's cold. The reason we do it cold is just like if you've ever had a brandy in your hand and warmed it up, those aromatics come off and you can smell whatever's coming off of it. If you let a white wine get hot, those aromatics will come off and they're gone, and then there's nothing left. You want to keep those aromatics in the juice, so you ferment it cold. So that when you open the bottle and put it in your glass, that's when the aromatics want to come out. When you warm it up in your hands and warm it up in your mouth. Sir?
Yeah, so you had mentioned how like sometimes you guys spray the grapes with like natural bacteria and things like that.
Yeah.
Do you rinse the grapes before you go to press them or
No.
No.
Because, technical aside, he's sticking to it. Every bottle of stuff that you want to use on your field has a pre-harvest interval. So it says pre-harvest 4 days. After you spray, you can't pick for 4 days because it gives it a chance to break down. And some have a week, some have day of, it doesn't matter. Most of them have like 4 days. So no, we don't have to wash them off because they break down into their other components by that time anyway. So yeah, it's a pretty clean process. We are as clean as possible. We are not organic because some non-organic things are actually better than your organic. For instance, phosphorus, whole phosphorus has toxins in it. But when you break those toxins out and only use the good part, it's considered not organic anymore. So using organic phosphorus, there's toxins in it. Taking those out becomes not non-organic anymore. Which doesn't make any sense to me, but that's the organic laws. So we're not organic because of that. Because we'll try and stay a little bit cleaner in the process. Any other questions about that? Winemaking, juice. More early. But it definitely has tannins in it. You can feel those tannins on your cheeks. Did you get some? I didn't get any.
The last one that we drank was
Sangiovese. Sangiovese, it's what Chianti is made from. In Tuscany. It's my favorite. Okay, let's go in the cellar and see what's happening in there. These are some of the containers we'll put the white juice in. These are 2 of them, it's not 1 unit. This on the back is a refrigeration unit. We put the glycol in here. We can keep this at 30 degrees or 40 degrees, keep the wine cool. Put the juice in the top, keeps it cool, and then it's tapped out of, it's spun around. There's a hose that comes out the bottom. You just drain everything out the bottom. This bin here can hold 3 tons of fruit. This bin here can hold 5 tons of fruit. A lot of times we'll bring in that much fruit from a particular area. We'll split off that juice later and blend it to make several different wines, not always just one wine. 1 ton or 2 tons make 5 barrels, which is like 120 gallons. So that's a lot of juice if you have 5 tons in here. So we'll split that up. We'll make all sorts of different kind of wines from that. And we do get that much fruit in of one thing at a time.
Watch your step here, please. Watch your feet. Step over. This is the cellar. We're going to go right into the barrel room. Come on in and get a couple people over here. There we go. This is our barrel room. There is a humidifier up there, and this is cooled to 55 degrees. We keep it nice and cool, nice and damp for the barrels. There's 400 barrels in here. That's over 120 bottles, 120,000 bottles. Each barrel holds 59 gallons. It's like 25 cases, 300 bottles. So when people ask me how much wine do you drink, I said not much, just like this much. For a year, that's all I need is one of these in my house every year, and that's fine, that's all I need. These are made from French oak or Hungarian oak and some American oak barrels also. But we get them when they're neutral, meaning we buy them from another always white wine house. We don't want to buy them from a red wine house that have used them so many times that there's no more oak influence on whatever wine goes in here. It's also toasted inside. Every one of these inside these barrels are burnt to light, medium, or heavy toast. That's how whiskey gets its brown smokiness. It's from the inside of the barrel. It's not the liquid. It's from the inside of the barrel. Otherwise, whiskey would just be Everclear. So the barrels are neutral, meaning there is no influence to our wines. And the reason we want them that way is because we have Arizona fruit in an Arizona winery. We would not want French influence, Hungarian influence, the southern United States influence on our wines. If we wanted to put some kind of an oaky note to it, we would use these staves. Two of these make the same surface area as is inside of a barrel. These are made out of Arizona oak. Arizona oak kind of grows funny, so we can't make straight staves. It's too hard to do. So we just make these little ones, put them inside the barrel, and when we get to the oak flavor profile we want, we will take them out and let the juice rest. These barrels obviously breathe because they're wood, they have pores in them. So they will evaporate and you'll lose wine out of here. We call that the angel's share because we don't really know where it goes, so we figure the angels just took it. So we have to, those big beer kegs over there are full of more wine of the same types, so we just empty them and fill them back up again. We believe that oak is like salt. If you can taste the salt in your food, you used too much. If you can taste the oak in your wine, they used too much. Some of those cheaper European wines, they're using 100% brand new oak, and they just taste like wood. They do. They just have woody character. You taste it, and if you don't know what I'm talking about before, now the next time you get one of those, you'll know, like, yeah, this tastes like sticks. It really does. I don't know why this wine was bad before. Now I know. It was too much oak in it. There's nothing you can do with that except add wine that didn't have any oak in it to balance it out and kind of cut the oak down. Which is what our winemakers will do. They'll leave some in barrel, and they might use some oak, and they might use some that's neutral, and then they'll go in, and another process of the blending is to see how to make the best possible wine we can do from blending what different kinds of juice we have. We make over 70 labels. Many of them are single varietals, like your Ramonette, Counoise Rosé, and the Sangiovese that you had. The one that you're drinking now is a blend of Syrah, Petit Syrah. We make lots of blends. That's how we end up with 70, because the winemakers get excited one day and they say, hey, what happens when you put these two together?
And suddenly you have something else. And so now we have 71 instead of 70. And it just goes like that. One year we had 75 because there was other ones to make. We do have one more wine to have. It's going to come out of this barrel right here. This barrel used to live way in the back. And if you can look down any one of these rows, it's just dark back there. It's dark and it's cold and it's damp, and it used to live back there, and we'd have to go back there to get it. So we finally talked them into moving it up here. But when it lived back there, our marketing manager's daughters were in here one day. Oh, there they go. That's our marketing. Hey, Luke! Hold on. There we go. Father and two daughters. They were in here one day, and Luke was telling his daughters about how these barrels lived in the back. It was dark and it was cold. And one of the girls said, "Oh, that's just like an atolla." And Luke said, "What is an atolla? Who knows what an atolla is?" Yeah, I didn't know either. So an atolla is one of those jellyfish that live in the deepest, darkest, coldest parts of the ocean. And since this was living in the deepest, darkest, coldest part of our cellar, we decided to name this Atolla because she was smart enough to tell us that. Of course, I don't know how old she is. I mean, she's only that big. So I guess you learn oceanography sooner in life than what I did. So this is called a thief. This thief does exactly what it's called. You put your thumb on it just like a straw in your soda, and you soak up, you get the wine to move up into there, put your thumb on top to hold it in there, and bring it out just like your soda. You open it up and you put it in your mouth. But we're not going to do it that way today. More.
How long do you use these barrels for?
We'll use them forever until they break. Having gotten them from another house, they're already about 6 years old. So if you have a brand new barrel, it's 100% new oak. You'll probably sometimes see that on a label. And then you use it one time, it becomes 50% oak. You use it again, it's 25% oak. And then 12, and then 6.5, and then 3, and then basically neutral. So that's like 6 years. So that's when we get them, they're already 6 years old. This is Malbec with some Cabernet and some Mourvedre. So Malbec is that kind of smoky, earthy red from Argentina, which originally was from France. Then you get the Cabernet everybody knows. Mourvedre is kind of like Sangiovese, smoky, tarry, cherry. This is the only one that is aged for 2 years. Everything else is aged for 9 to 10 months. This is also the only wine that is exclusive to you. You can't get this. Who did I cheat?
That's yours.
So you can't get this upstairs. You can't buy this in stores. You can only buy this here on the tour. Also, that Sangiovese that you just had, the first red, has not been released yet. So you can be the first ones to get that because you can get it on the tour, but no one else has it.
The first one we have?
The first red.
Oh, first one.
The first red was the Sangiovese. It's not been released yet. We don't know when it's going to be released to upstairs, and we have it released to us now, so you can get it first before anybody else can get it. When a wine is ready to be bottled, this is the last part of the process from the ground into your glass. Let's say that all 4 of these. It's really tall. By the way, if you have to test these wines, you do have to climb up there to get it and use a thief to get them out. And I've been up there. They are 5 high, like this are 5 high over there, and they do tend to move like the Empire State Building when you get up there. So you just have to, you got to climb up and get it, and then you have to climb back down with the wine in something and not spill it. And if you're testing wines or sampling or whatever, you got to do the entire top row and then the next row, whatever. So it's kind of sketchy going up there, but it's kind of fun too. So let's say all 4, this is the same wine. Let's say it's all Atolla that you're drinking right now. We're not gonna bottle this one and go to the next one and bottle that and then go to the next one and bottle that because they're gonna taste different because they're in different barrels. The numbers on the barrels are the first set of numbers is the year the barrel was born or made. The second number is just its number. So this one was 2001, barrel number 195. So that's 20 years old. That's the 2006. This is a 2000. That's 2003. So you can kind of tell. Other numbers that are really weird, we don't know what it's about. That's because our winemaker has his own private label, and so he numbers them differently. But they're all kind of the same. The 7 just says it's his, like on that one. The 18 means that's a 2018 barrel. Barrel number 1001. So we're going to take all these, we're going to empty them into one of those big tanks, mix it all up to make it homogeneous, so we can barrel the whole thing at the same time. And so your first bottling. So your first bottle will be the same as your last bottle. So let's go over to the bottling line, and I'll show you how that all works. So after we get all those barrels that we want to get into one of these big tanks, mix it all up so it all tastes the same. We'll hook a big hose to the end of it, and we'll run it on the floor over to that machine there. That's our bottler.